The next day of school came and Hirota walked into class. Micho said good morning, and to her surprise, Hirota bowed his head apologizing. Say good morning, sorry for what you did yesterday. Then he wished everyone a good morning and came to school with a smile so bright, full of energy. He says everything is okay now and realizes it may be too late to say sorry, but if it's okay, he would like to help the class once again. At first, a few girls rushed to his side. Not before long, his other classmates joined him. Hirota then turned and asked Kiyotaka what happened, to where he replies saying it's a collective effort. Hirota thought that he may have been forcing it, but ultimately denies that. Hirota then approached the final boss, Horikita, and says his hellos. Yes, good morning. Probably shaken about how radiant Hirota was now. I'd like it if you fill me on the details of the special exam later, added Hirota. Horikita agreed and they made a deal shaking hands. Anyway, I guess this means we're finally ready to face the special exam now. This was the last piece Class C needed in order to face Class A. Konji, on the other hand, was the only one who didn't seem affected by it. What an amazing chapter. We really got to solve the Hirota problem, and god damn, it was a beautiful realization of his fantasy and just the development in his scene. Beautiful. That's all I can really say. I think it made me tear up the first time I read it, and it was just such a touching moment between two bros. I think most people call it like, you know, the sus moment, but like, you know, it was between two bros, and I love that scene personally, so it's great. It seems like this will really separate Classroom Elite from other high school series, developing multiple characters with backstories you can really care about. It's special, and I hope to see a lot more of it. After all the long prep, the fated day of the final special exam had arrived. Again, if the commanders of the classes are to lose, then they will be expelled. Today I want you to forget about all the notes and pointers I have given you. It was Horikita. She had told Kiyotaka to pick any 5 events he wants, and whoever to participate in them too. In other words, she has set the stage for him, not even telling the rest of the class what events they would be picking. She had told them they were going up against Class A, the most formidable opponent in the school year. Nobody would blame him if they were to lose. Kiyotaka was getting ready to leave, but he was told by Horikita that the chances of chess getting chosen was 70%. The past few days, the two had played several matches. Horikita stated that she hardly won against Kiyotaka, even when he was going easy on her. To which Kiyotaka replied, "Nobody is stronger than me, even when I'm going easy on them. Remember that." I don't know about you, but like, that's goosebumps for me. Like, come on, Kiyotaka is saying, "Hey yo, I want you to know, when I'm even using 1% of my power, when I'm going easy on you, no one is better than me. Remember that." Horikita said he had a lot of confidence in himself and had left it at that. Kiyotaka then left and went to go fulfill his duties as the commander. When at the special building, he ran into Sakayanagi and Ichinose, who had arrived before him. They were still waiting outside. It looked like they weren't allowed to enter yet. They both greeted at the same time, to where Kiyotaka gave a light wave. They were instructed by the school to say when all 4 commanders were there. Just one was missing. Kanda of Class D. Sakayanagi would say Ichinose is lucky to face Class D, as the loss of ryuen made their chances of winning non-existent. She would also express her thoughts on Kanda coming at the last moment. Ichinose seemed to be bracing herself for the exam. As soon as Kanda got here, the exam would start. All of a sudden, Ichinose had a dumbfounded expression on her face. Even Sakayanagi was surprised. Ryuen-kun, why are you here? Oh, yes, baby. The GOAT is back. Ichinose would ask if there was a penalty for this, that being Kanda isn't allowed to participate in any of the events. Ichinose asked Ryuen if he did this to throw her off. But Ryuen said he's just Class D sacrifice, and if he loses, this is the perfect chance to get rid of him. "Then are you saying you'll go easy on me?" asked Ichinose. Spreading his arms, Ryuen then laughed. He said he'd ease up on her and to come at him. Ichinose wasn't going to fall for this though. He had also added that when Ryuen wants to win, then he would pull any trick in the book. Ryuen said yeah, that's if he wants to win. He was still feeling the effects from after Volume 7. He appeared not to care about the school to this day. Ichinose felt this was a bad omen, as Ryuen doesn't have a protection point. So if Ryuen loses this exam, he will get expelled. Sakayanagi stated that the showdown between Class B and D is going to be an interesting one too. Sakayanagi, this was nothing but a laughing matter, but for Ichinose, this was different. Sure, she was confident before, but now you have Ryuen taking the spot as commander for Class D? This has taken her back, and she didn't have the confidence like she did a few minutes before. Mashima Sensei came out and asked for Class B and D to go in one section, and for Class A and C to go in another. The facilitators for Class A and C were Sakagami and Hoshinomiya Sensei. As for B, it was Mashima and Chabashira Sensei. The test will begin in 5 minutes. Take this time to compose yourselves while you can. Leaving that piece of advice, Hoshinomiya then took Sakagami Sensei away for one final talk about prep for the exam. It was just Kiyotaka and Sakayanagi left in the room together. Sakayanagi said that she'd been waiting for this day, and she couldn't even sleep last night, almost oversleeping this morning. Kiyotaka replied saying he doesn't remember making her wait so long, and that meeting at the school was only a coincidence. She wasn't having this though. She laughed and denied this idea. She said it was a mere coincidence they met at the school, but their meeting was fate decided long ago. Fate, huh? You're saying some pretty abstract things, says Kiyotaka. Well, I am a young lady after all. It was Sakayanagi. She said this and smiled. as she continued to approach Kiyotaka with her cane in her hand. She stated if Kiyotaka didn't enroll at the school, then she would have postponed this meeting for another 3 years, even going as far to say it would have been difficult to subdue her feelings to compete with him. That's how much she had been dreaming of this day. She was almost obsessed with facing Kiyotaka. It was the only thing in her mind, the only thing in her heart. Sakayanagi had stated that she would normally ask Kiyotaka to go easy on her, but for today, to face her with everything he's got. Even Kiyotaka knew he couldn't half-ass this. He wasn't doing this to make her happy. It feels it would be troublesome to get involved any more than he has with her. Both of them think this exam wasn't fully enough to demonstrate their full potential, as commanders can only intervene at certain points. Hoshinomiya-sensei then came back and said the exam will begin any second now, so take a seat. They couldn't see each other due to the 2 big monitors in their field of vision. Sakagami then asked the 2 to select the 5 events they want to pick. Kiyotaka then selected 5 events Horikita had in mind and confirmed immediately. Those events being archery, basketball, table tennis, typing, and tennis. He had thought of throwing in rock, paper, scissors, but ultimately went against it. Kiyotaka knew Hirata and Onodera both specialize in swimming and football, but he chose not to go for these events, as they may be useful in another event sometime down the line. As for Class A's events, chess, English, modern literature, math, and flash mental arithmetic. 3 of the events Katsuragi actually predicted she would choose, giving Kiyotaka and Keisei the perfect answer at the time. Anywho, Ayanokoji-kun, it sure is a shame you're gonna have to go up against someone like Sakayanagi-san. Sensei feels so sorry for you, stated Hoshinomiya-sensei, who was silent to her Sakagami, saying she knows the rules. She then apologized for speaking out of turn. Little does she know, this match wouldn't be easier for either of them. After that, Sakagami walked towards the monitor and the screen showed a 3D image of all the events in consideration. The first event was then selected. Basketball. Required participants, 5, 20 minutes in total, with 2 halves and 4-minute intervals. It was the event Class C had chosen. In other words, they couldn't lose. Sakayanagi had asked if they were allowed to speak, to where he said there are no rules against it and to do as they wish. What? Sakayanagi is so merciless. Like a biased commentator, Hoshinomiya spoke out again, before being told to shut up by Sakagami. It would appear that unlike students, the teachers were not allowed to speak. Sakayanagi then began to speak her mind, mentioning Class C chose a fair few sporting events, but also found it understandable due to the fact how very few of them could study, looking at Kiyotaka to engage with her, but he just stayed silent. Sakayanagi really is trying to trash talk my boy, but he wouldn't budge. Kiyotaka wanted to avoid making too much of an impression in front of Hoshinomiya and Sakagami. Even Sakayanagi was aware of this fact. Kiyotaka spoke. He said Horikita warned him not to say anything excessive to her and get trapped in one of her tricks. Sakayanagi then said, Kiyotaka, you just made a blunder, mentioning that Horikita is the one controlling you from the shadows. Kiyotaka tried to deny this fact. Sakayanagi repeated what he just told her, saying Horikita told you not to say anything, right? Both teachers shook their heads, seeing how easy it was for Sakayanagi to take such information at the time. This was good, as this exchange would show the difference between the two. They were able to trick the teachers watching over them. From here, the special exam will now begin. To exchange words again, Sakayanagi, once like before, gets information out of Kiyotaka. Sakagami, unable to watch this anymore, speaks up, saying they are free to speak, but don't neglect the task due to time limit. The two finished making their choices for basketball. For Class C, the participants were Makida, Minami, Ike, Hondo, and Onodera. Sudo was not amongst them. They chose to add Onodera and Makida as their skills were good enough to pass the event. Horikita opted for Onodera as she would be better than choosing a boy with no experience. Of course, Sudo was the ace of basketball within Class C, but the strategy to not include him was what Class C actually decided. Sakayanagi actually saw through this, realizing they wanted to use Sudo's fast reflexes for something like tennis or table tennis. Class A's chances of winning would be lower if Sudo was picked for basketball, so they wouldn't risk putting up skillful players in this event. So Class C not picking Sudo would have been smart, but Sakayanagi actually saw through this scheme. She had asked who came up with the rules, asking if it was Horikita. Kiyotaka said he couldn't answer that. Moving on, they watched as preparations for the event went underway. A whistle blew and the event began. At first, even though they didn't have Sudo on their team, they were still equally matched with Class A. They were neck and neck. When one team scored, the other one would score a while after. Makida wasn't bad, but his skills were nowhere near Sudo's. On the other hand, Class A's ace, Kito, was proving himself to be an equal match against him. By halftime, the score was 12-11. Class C was in the lead, but only by 1 point. Sakayanagi then expressed her thoughts, saying the match was really interesting. In the 4-minute rest interval, Kiyotaka reached to his keyboard and swapped Ike with Sudo. It's true that both teams were evenly matched, but there was no way you could tell how it would play out. Kiyotaka was torn whether or not to pick Sudo for the past 10 minutes, but opted to anyways. Sakayanagi would laugh, showing he didn't have any intention of letting Kiyotaka preserve Sudo's potential. Not before long Sudo arrived. He had the same thoughts Kiyotaka would have. After the 4-minute interval, Kito began to guard Sudo. I knew it, you bastard, we were holding back, eh? It was Sudo's voice yelling from the monitor. It would appear Kito was holding back from the first half, but Sudo was still a level above him. He managed to shake Kito off and get into Class A's side of the court, but despite the fact he was above the rest of the other players, Class A seemed to be above his teammates. The score was now 17-13. While the points were wider than before, the opposing team's pace began to gradually pick up. Kito and Sudo went back and forth, and their voices echo out the monitor. Sakayanagi would say Kito is actually an experienced basketball player, and by messing with Sudo, his mentality would inevitably collapse. If Kito couldn't win by skill alone, he would look to rile up Sudo, trying to start a fight with him. My team will be catching up with yours soon enough, stated Sakayanagi. The score was now 17-15. Class A was putting the pressure on. Pseudo's mental turmoil had indeed evened out the playing field. Kiyotaka would then ask Sakayanagi, where did you hear Pseudo was immature? She asked what he meant. He had a thought in his head. He knew Pseudo has grown up a lot this year, and his willpower wouldn't crumble to something like this. And besides, Pseudo knew Horikita wouldn't care how cool he looked in the match. That would only come from carrying his team to victory. The roar then came from Pseudo, and the smoothness of his play returned. Nobody was able to stop him, not even Kito. He then finished his run down on the court, dunking on Class A, once again extending the lead for Class C. Heh, I got a little bit heated there, but there's no way you're beating me. I find this so dope because we have really got to see Pseudo develop as one of the most weird characters, I would say. He was almost like he would break over anything, punch anyone in the face, and to start a fight over anything. And now you really look at who he is today, and he's become more of a chilled out person. So he still has more of those emotions there where he gets a little bit riled up, but he's a little bit more controlled, and that's what I love about Pseudo, and I really want to see more of it from him in the second year. I see. So he's done some growing up of his own, Sakayanagi realized. The whistle then rang, signifying the end of the match. Pseudo did it. He managed to carry Class C to victory in the first event. Hell yeah, I did it, Suzune, yelled Pseudo. Of course he's got to call out to his love, am I right? It was only one win, but his excitement was well deserved. The final score of the match, a whopping 24-16, with a victory to Class C. Who would have thought that Class C would win first? Hoshinomiya mumbled this to herself, just impressed over what she just saw. The time had come to choose the second event. The result? Typing. Required participants 1 with a time limit of 30. This event is this basic typing skill. If you guys ever played Type Racer, if y'all know, you know, this is pretty much what it is. It's entailing speed and accuracy over vocab and essays. As for how the commanders can intervene, they would be allowed to help the student over one mistake, and that was all. Once again, this was an event that Class C picked, but luck was on their side. The event had been proposed by the professor, the man who had the fastest typing and the most prominent in the whole of Class C. In fact, his speed was almost unquestionably fast, even compared to a national average. They had to put faith in him, as they had no other way of measuring any of Class A students. Sakayanagi then called this event another interesting one, thinking it looked like a game at first, but realized this could be accepted as an event due to the fundamental skill of IT. Kiyotaka would choose the professor, that being Sotomura, where Sakayanagi would pick Yoshida Kenta, a student Kiyotaka knew nothing about. For this event, they made the rules that the commander wouldn't intervene as much as usual. The outcome of the results was judged by a computer application. Time passes, and the result were the professor, 90 points, and Yoshida Kenta, 84 points. Class C would win once again. This was good, but scary, as it was only a 7-point difference. Class A had ended up losing twice in a row, something really unexpected, but in a way inevitable, due to both events being from Class C. Luck had been on the side for Class C, but this wouldn't continue, as the next event was an English test by Class A. Required participants 8 and a time limit of 50. If they have to sit there for the whole of the 50 minutes until this test is over, I would be stressed. I would die of boredom. Like, goddamn. As for the commander intervention in this match, they were allowed to answer a single question on the test. If Class C was able to win, they would have a big advantage. Kiyotaka came up with a lineup of students starting with Michan. He couldn't afford to use big names like Horikita and Keisa yet. Sakayanagi quickly decided on her 8 names, where Kiyotaka took a moment longer. She spoke to Kiyotaka, saying this was the longest time she's seen him taken so far, realizing that Horikita has left him with a number of options for this event. The worst part was, Class C had the tendency to be the worst in English. Kiyotaka thought if he should just balance out the two teams and go for the win, or just throw away the chance to win at this one. Sakayanagi would prompt a question, asking if he would want to choose and fight, or maybe use up all his strength and give up and lose this event. But you see, the thing is, Kiyotaka was not afraid of losing here. She said she can tell what he's thinking, saying that he's afraid, and saying Class C may have anticipated to choose and give up on English. As a result, they preserved their better students for later. After some thought, Kiyotaka decided to give up on the English event. Sakayanagi mentioned that the people he chose, that being a range of women, saying that girls tend to do better in a variety of subjects than boys do, and English happens to be one of these subjects. Kiyotaka knew that Class A couldn't afford to lose in an event like this, so he knew Sakayanagi would choose powerful contenders for this event. The 8 people Kiyotaka listed for this event were as followed: Kei, Sato, Shinohara, Inokahira, Sonoda, Ichihashi. All students won't be needed for future events. And I'm gonna say, like, some of these names towards the end were really hard to say. I'm not gonna lie, I had to take multiple takes for that. Sakayanagi selected 8 students, and while not being the very best options, there was still a solid group of people. And just like the girl comment from before, 6 of 8 were girls within Class A's picks. It seems you've chosen to give up on English and focus on the future, an acceptable decision. Sakayanagi understood this. It would appear that she had a good grasp of Class C's academic abilities. The event had to sit there and watch the event unfold. The results of the exam? Class C, 443 points, and Class A, 651 points. Class A wins the third event. They only averaged a score of 81%, said Sakayanagi, mentioning if Class C went all out, they may have been able to win this one. The next test was then announced, that being math. Required participants 7 and a time limit of 50 minutes. Once again, the same rules as English. Sakayanagi said they had to go all out, but also questioned if they were saving this for the modern literature test. Kiyotaka thought he shouldn't bet on that and choose all of his best choices right now. Sakayanagi mentioned that girls were better at English, but for maths, it's actually boys who have the lead. Kiyotaka chose Hidata, Keisei, Ishikura, Wang Mei, Azuma, Yoshida Kikyo, Nishimura, the strongest 7-man lineup plus he could pick. Sakayanagi then picked her 7, her choices being mostly male of equal or higher academic ability as last event. Not after long, the test went underway, with Keisei taking the top spot. If they were to win against Class A here, then the chances would rise winning the exam. The results, Class C, 631 points, and an average score of 90% all around. However, Class A, 655 points. Class A wins. Only a 24-point gap, but still a loss. That was dangerously close. Everyone in Class C must have studied quite a lot. If you have chosen Horikita-san or Konji-kun, you may have won. Don't you think? Sakayanagi questioned. Maybe so, Kiyotaka replied. It was true, they didn't win here, but there's no chance in choosing Horikita or Konji they would have won. On top of that, they had the chance of modern literature being chosen next. If that was the case, it would be an instant loss. The score was 2-2 after the first 4 events. The 5th event then came, and it was Flash Mental Arithmetic. Required participants 2 and a time limit of 30 minutes. Same rules for the commander as the past 2. Now this was seen unfavorable, but due to the deal made with Katsuragi, there may still be some hope. Kiyotaka opted to choose Konji and Matsushita. He picked Matsushita to have the headset, as if Konji had it on, he probably wouldn't have listened anyway. As for Sakayanagi, she chose Tamiya and Katsuragi. This was good because Katsuragi actually leaked Tamiya's abilities, saying they weren't all that impressive. Even though the event was about to begin, Konji folded his arms and closed his eyes. It backfired. His attitude hadn't changed since the first special exam. The test went on and Konji would leave his sheet blank. They had no choice but to rely on Katsuragi. Matsushita was unfazed by this all and answered every question correctly. However, once they reached the 5th problem, the difficulty increased again. Matsushita was at her wit's end. The test only got harder and harder, and Sakayanagi-sensei agreed that the difficulty was a bit too high. The extent to where Katsuragi would throw would influence this match greatly. The event reached its final question. The 15 numbers then flashed on and off the screen in a quick rapid succession. For a moment, everything went silent. Both Sakayanagi and Kiyotaka signaled the teachers saying they wanted to make the intervention. They asked what question the commanders would like to give the answer for. Kiyotaka naturally chose the last one, that being question 10. Matsushita complied with Kiyotaka's instructions and wrote down the answer he provided. She herself didn't know the answer, so she had no reason to turn down Kiyotaka. Poo. Flash Mental Arithmetic is quite an interesting game. I've never tried it before. It was Konji, who had opened his eyes at some point. He looked at the camera they would watch him from and smiled. What question did you provide an answer for, Ayanokoji-kun? I chose the 10th, with an answer of 7,619. I did as well, replied Kiyotaka. It seems Sakayanagi was able to solve the last question. As the teachers collected everyone's answer sheets, the man who hadn't responded to a single question once again opened his mouth. It was Konji. He had said the answer for the last question. Overhearing this, Sakayanagi clapped, praising him. What really makes you question all of this again? If Konji was to answer the last question, opening his eyes in 1 second, how smart really is he? The teachers began to tally up the scores. If Katsuragi had gotten the 7th, 8th, or 9th question correct, then Class C would lose. The teachers then finished. First place went to Katsuragi. He got 8 out of 10 correct. Class A wins event 5. Sakayanagi said it was regrettable, saying that persuading Katsuragi was a mistake, and that she wouldn't overlook a weakness like this. She mentioned to Katsuragi that she would expel more of his earnest, hard-working students if he is to portray her again. They could have won if Konji went serious, but that was just a past thought. Class C was now at 2 wins and 3 losses. They were on the edge of a cliff. Only 2 events left, and the special exam would be over. It's really such a shame, Sakayanagi would say, as she sighed, wanting to enjoy this for much longer. If another Class A event was to be chosen, Class C would definitely lose. While Class A and C were going at the 3rd event, the outcome of Class B and D's 4th event had been decided. Class B was 601 points, and Class D were 409 points. Mashima-sensei read out these results, and Ichinose let out a sigh of relief. Well, ain't you a lucky one, Ichinose? You should be grateful we keep drawing Class B's events. It was like a winner was clearly distraught, whereas the loser ryuen was perfectly composed. Within this match so far, 4 of the events chosen, 3 of them belonged to Class B. These events didn't play out as expected, as the score was tied 2-2 apiece. Class B and D were even. During the 3rd event, Class B had lost their own game in the chemistry test. The reason for this was obvious. Sensei, if the students with their stomach aches came out from the bathroom yet? It was Ichinose asking Mashima-sensei if the 2 students have gotten back since their sudden stomach ache. Mashima had got in contact to check and confirm they haven't, and even several others started to feel unwell now. The reason Class B would lose the 3rd event was because of this unexpected sickness, but that's not the only reason. The day before the exam, some of Class B's students had got into a dispute with Class D's. A complaint was made to the school, but they classified this as nothing but a verbal argument. These actions were orchestrated by none other than the man on the other side of the table, Ryuen Kakadu. It's okay. Ichinose took a few breaths to compose herself. The Class B haven't given up the lead just yet. Ichinose just lost their presence of mind, losing the 3rd event, but was slowly returning to her normal self. Oi, you teachers, hurry up and start the 5th event already. Those chumps in Class B weren't even able to take care of their health on the day of the exam? Are you really gonna make concessions for such a naive bunch like that? Mind your language, Ryuen, warned Chabishida. But he didn't seem to care. Ryuen carried on and took it one step further. I don't know if they're on the toilet or whatever, but they could really be using this time to iron out a strategy. Plus, it's strange that multiple people just happen to get sick all at the same time. What kind of sinister tricks are you playing at, ichinose? I am dying. I am dying laughing at this. Like, really, you can't help but love Ryuen being a straight savage and just not giving a single fuck, yo. He wanted to make Ichinose break. He would do anything to win. This was like the old Ryuen we were used to seeing. Ryuen would do these schemes like accusing Class B of cheating due to them being sick at the same time. Ichinose knew she had no wrongdoing, but had no room to refute it either. With a grin on his face, Ryuen continued to look at Chabishida and asked to please get on with it already. Ryuen is certainly right about that. Mashima-sensei, please proceed with the 5th event if you would. The 5th event then started. Karate. Required participants free and a time limit of 10 minutes. Commander intervention would allow them to call for one of the matches to be redone. Ryuen was happy that it was one of their events. He called to take on anyone. He locked in 3 students as well as Ichinose. But as a result, Class B lost twice. Even when Ichinose used their rematch, it wouldn't matter. It didn't change a thing. This 5th event had been the quickest and most decisive loss so far. It's funny, isn't it, Ichinose? Ryuen went up and spoke to the girl who had gotten quieter. When it was decided that you'll be going against Class D back when the special exam was announced, I'll bet you guys felt like you had an absolute advantage. But looking at you now, it's like the only thing you could do is sit and pray to the heavens. Cuckoo. Ryuen expressed his feelings in this, just laughing at Ichinose now. Next event was chosen. It was judo. Required participants 1 and a time limit of 4 minutes. Same commander rules as last time. A one-on-one event. This was the worst possible situation for Class B. It was the first time Ichinose had been plunged into the darkness. Cuckoo, judo. Judo, eh? For that, to get chosen of all things. Lady Luck ain't smiling down on you, huh, Ichinose? Ryuen laughed once again, teasing Ichinose. He also continued and said that if the last 2 events were from Class B, they would have had a chance of winning. He took no hesitation, locked in Yamada Albert. Bruh, if you lock in Albert in judo, I think we all know how this is going to end. Even though your opponent is Albert, don't let it get to you. The strongest guy doesn't always win, so you never know until you give it your shot. What Ryuen said could really relate to his loss against Kiyotaka. I know Kiyotaka is stronger than Ryuen, but when it comes to pure strength and power, Albert lost to Kiyotaka, so what he's saying holds some type of truth. This was the event Ichinose had chosen to give up on. She had 30 seconds, timer counted down, and hit 0. As a result, the school would pick a random student. But considering the danger of this event, Mashima rose this as a defeat instead. Class B loses, and this marks the 4th win for Class D. The battle of Class B and D had now been set in stone. Now let's turn the story back a little, going back to when the special exam was announced. Ishizaki came to find Ryuen to ask his advice, and beg him to lend a hand to Class D with this exam. Ryuen wouldn't budge and told Ishizaki he had stepped down already. He mentioned if they lose, all their class points would be pretty much gone. If they were to lose all 7 matches, there would be around 100 class points. He had no choice but to ask Ryuen. But Ryuen found this ridiculous, not agreeing to be commander. Ishizaki then asked Ryuen if they should go after Class C, but Ryuen said not to ask his opinion, as he would never cooperate. He mentions Class C isn't unified, but have a monster like Ayanokoji, but he's just one guy. Apart from that, they could win. Ryuen shared his thought on this, saying that if he was commander, he wouldn't even face Class C. Ishizaki once mentioned that all they have is Ayanokoji, but was cut off by Ryuen, saying that he has nothing to do with it. Ryuen mentioned that Class C is full of morons like him, but there's a way to win, and Class C isn't the best ticket to do that. Class B is. He said if they're looking to win, the only way is facing Class B. Ryuen starts to walk away, and Ishizaki shouts, questioning how they can beat Class B, but Ryuen didn't stop. He continued walking and left Ishizaki. The one that should have been expelled during the class vote was Ryuen, but he was still here. Class C used their votes to scare Manabe a bit, but she was actually the one who ended up being expelled. That really backfired, huh? But the real question was on everyone's mind was who cast such a large number of praise votes on Ryuen? The reality of the situation was that Class B's Ichinose indirectly struck a deal with Ryuen, offering a large number of praise votes in exchange of his stockpile of private points. Hiro would make good use of advice that Ishizaki got from Ryuen. She worked diligently to ensure that Class C would face off against Class B, having a private conversation with Kanda to guide him. Ishizaki, Ibuki, and Hiro will all have a talk, and they met up at a karaoke club. Ibuki wasn't having this and said she wanted to leave. But Hiro said this would be problematic, as Ryuen was going to show up after this. What? Both Ishizaki and Ibuki said this at the same time. Hiro stated that Ryuen was absolutely essential to winning the special exam, as he's the one who saw potential in facing Class B. But that's not what they meant. They asked her to elaborate what she just said. Once again, Hiro said Ryuen was coming here. It's been more than half an hour. That's not called being late. That's called being ignored. This is why I love Hiro so much. She's just chilling and she'll believe anything anyone tells her. Ibuki gets convinced to stay and more time passes. It's now 8 PM and Ibuki is getting angry and is at a limit. Right before Ibuki was about to reach for the door handle, the door was open suddenly. The hell? Did you guys seriously wait here thinking I'll show up eventually? It was Ryuen. It was Ryuen. He arrived in the room with a grin on his face. The conversation then happened between Hiyori and Ryuen. You're late, Ryuen-kun. You say that, but it looks like you're enjoying yourself. Yes, I've never been to karaoke before. I'm having a great time. Ryuen then said he would leave and tell Ibuki to enjoy herself. Ibuki wasn't taking the shit and said she would kick his ass if she has to stay here any longer. Ryuen then sat down and went on his phone, not saying a single thing. Some time passes and Ibuki starts to get mad at Ryuen for not saying a thing. But Ryuen just replies, saying he came to check if they were still wasting their time waiting for him. With a smile, Ryuen began to open up. He asked a question, that being if they remember what he did to Class B at the start of the year. This is when he caused a dispute within Class B, what caused them to have a falling out, around about the time Suda got into a brawl. Ryuen asked if they remember the result of all this, that being Class B coming together in unity quickly. Others thought this would be the reason they should stay away from facing Class B, but Ryuen, you see, he was different. He said their greatest flaw was ichinose, but continued further saying no, scratch that, it's not her, but it's their lack of a leader figure. Everyone within Class B, that being ichinose or kanzaki, were instead better at supporting a leader. This is the reason why their rotten Class D stands a chance of winning. Ryuen went to add, with a bit of trickery, their chances of winning will become closer to 50%, and higher depending on the situation. Ryuen gave Hiyori a piece of paper showing the events they would be choosing. They then speak a little more now on how they would match up. Ibuki seemed hesitant about this idea. She says she would cooperate with Ryuen, but she wants him to guarantee a win. He laughs and says of course, even having a plan in the process. So they come up with a strategy, to start picking on Class B students day in and day out until the exam. They would start light and gradually get worse and worse. The goal was just to interact with them and stress them out. Ryuen says not to think of anything like threatening them or fighting them at this point, and to save it as a trump card to pull off at the very end. He wanted Class D to keep things as abstract and vague as possible. The most important thing with these interactions was to steal information. Ryuen said they were to do all of that and then take measures using this, pulling out a slow-acting laxative, something that takes effect after 48 hours. So y'all remember when Class B students were going to the bathroom? Well yeah, Ryuen gave them diarrhea. Yeah, so we pretty much made them shit. Literally. Ryuen knew all of this was against the rules, but honestly didn't give a shit. We all know the type of guy Ryuen is. He's the type of man to do anything to win. Breaking the rules is just something little to him. With this, Ryuen also made the plan to come commando on the day. This was to stress out ichinose on the day too. Ishizaki would ask why Ryuen was doing this, to where he even asked the same. He leaned back on the couch and shut his eyes. He had no lingering attachments to this school anymore. Well, that was the case at first, but for some reason, this began to change, and he started to feel something. Ayanokoji kiyotaka. Ever since Ryuen lost to that very man, he felt frustrated and he wanted to leave the school. But by becoming the commander, he forced himself back into a situation where he was no longer able to look back. He was looking to confirm whether or not this frustration meant he wanted a rematch with Ayanokoji. If he didn't have any attachments, then he could select randoms and lose the exam on purpose. But if he still had regrets, if he felt a true desire to face Ayanokoji kiyotaka once more, he would find a way to survive. He wanted to know what option he would choose. Back to Class C and A, where at the 6th event, archery, what needed 1 participant and an hour per person, the commander rule being that they can use up to 30 minutes max to give instructions to their teammate, but this time would also take away from their hour participation. We'll be facing off in the 7th event, with 3 wins apiece, and I couldn't be happier. Furthermore, for this event to be our finale, it seems good things really do come to those who wait after all. Sakayanagi said this knowing they were going to face off in the 7th match, that being the finale of this all. That match being chess. Kiyotaka chose Hirikta to participate, whereas Sakayanagi picked Hashimoto. But this fight wasn't between those two. I'd go as far to say the real fight was between the 2 commanders. Would either of you like to get a drink of water? Hoshinami stated, as she was worried about the 2 not getting up once since the exam begun. The pressure was here, and neither of them will budge. The stage had been prepared and the final exam had begun. We now go into the perspective of Hirikta. She said if her opponent was Kiyotaka or Sakayanagi, she wouldn't stand a chance of winning, but the man across the table was different from the 2. That being Hashimoto. He then gave his good lucks to Hirikta. The only thing she could think was how much people think he's a scoundrel, including those in Class A. What's with the harsh look? Don't you want to enjoy this situation little? He asked Hirikta. But she didn't like that. Hirikta mentioned that a Class A student has been on top for the whole year wouldn't understand how meaningful this match is to Class C. The class that wins this chess match would earn 130 class points. They had a few more words. Hashimoto even asked her to go easy on him, as he's only been playing for a few months, but Hirikta stated she's only been playing for a week, even though a single piece hadn't moved on the board. The battle had already begun. The exam was very lenient in letting opponents talk to each other. This was the only time they could check and find cracks in each other's mentality. It was a 3-3 tie. Everything depended on this match. Hirikta recalled the words Kiyotaka said this morning. Nobody is stronger than me, even when I'm going easy on them. Remember that. As annoying as those words were, she found them incredibly reliable. I don't know why, but it doesn't feel like I'm going to lose. She thought this to herself before the match began. Hirikta was ready. We then began the match. Hirikta picked up a pawn. It was the first time she had ever touched a chess piece physically. It felt nice and cold. Her first move, pawn to e4. With that, Hashimoto's smile faded away. He then made his first move, pawn to e5. Hirikta then moved her knight, aiming to take back his black pawn. She She felt that all the matches she played with Kiyotaka, this was the best method. I've learned a lot from Sakayanagi myself. Did you really think I'm just gonna let you put Black at a disadvantage right from the start? Said Hashimoto. It would appear Horikita isn't the only one receiving lessons. Horikita had an hour, but only really 30 minutes, as the other 30 minutes would be used by Kiyotaka. As the match went on, she realized he refused to play defensively. She doesn't know who taught him this style, but it didn't follow a normal strategy. It was like he was making one offensive move after another. I've got quite the twisted playstyle, don't I? Question. So where he went on further, saying he got this playstyle from Sakayanagi, as she just plays just like him. He asked Horikita if she is self-taught, as the style was kind of steady compared to his. Trying to probe Horikita, looking to get something from her response. Hashimoto would continuously surround Horikita's pieces, as if he was driving her into a corner, but every move she made was slowly meant to approach him. Have you really only played 1 week, he asked, to where Horikita added, you love to talk, don't you? She went on to his question, saying it really has only been a week, but she can't deny it, and she could be lying. Hashimoto knew Horikita's level of play far surpassed the self-taught student who's only been learning a week. He knew that she had been trained by some sort of skilled chess player, just like Sakayanagi. Horikita said that she wouldn't tell him either way, to where Hashimoto said it's fine, but wanted to ask a few questions about none other than Kiyotaka. Horikita realized that even Hashimoto had begun to suspect Kiyotaka. Where Hashimoto questioned, ever since the island exam, he wonders if Kiyotaka was really the one controlling everything, and asked her opinion on it. Horikita asked what makes you think that about him, where Hashimoto says it's just a hunch, and to answer the question. What's there to answer? I don't even know what you're talking about. Is that so? You seem fairly shaken to me though. Horikita knew when Hashimoto was selected as her opponent, he would try all things like this. So she said no matter what tricks he pulls, it wouldn't get through to her. With that, I used my bishop to check Hashimoto's king, and the smile on his face disappeared once again. Before they were even 10 minutes into the game, his hand stopped for the first time, and Hashimoto had to think about what to do. He said she was a tough one, and this was unexpected due to her cute face. If the match continues like this and Classy would win, even Hashimoto realized this fact. Now back in Kiyotaka's perspective, Sakayanagi speaks, saying it is an interesting game and she would like to see it through to the very end. I agree. Let's just see it through to the very end then, replied Kiyotaka, knowing Horikita would win this match if it continued the way it was. Sakayanagi then laughed, and then interjected herself in the match, saying she doesn't trust Hashimoto anymore. If she were to postpone doing this for a few more minutes, then the defeat would be theirs. That's how terrifyingly strong Horikita was in this very moment. Kiyotaka was curious and felt like sitting watching how she does against Sakayanagi. Aren't you going to enter the match, Ayanokoji-kun? Where he replied, saying he would have a higher chance if he just let Horikita play now. With that, she entered some speech to get the fish what was out the water Hashimoto to move again. It would appear the time lag between their transmissions would be taken into account for the commander's 30 minutes. Kiyotaka wondered where this match would go, and he had hoped they would be evenly matched, and if they were, Horikita would be able to hold her advantage until the very end. But he didn't think it would turn out this way. Sakayanagi had entered the match with utmost confidence. Horikita had to consider how to fight her opponent when there was someone much stronger than her. She had to be resolute and make use of the time she saved during the opening of the match. Maybe I didn't give her enough of a handicap. Each time Horikita made a move, it took less than 5 seconds for Sakayanagi to respond. These moves weren't just basic though. They were calm and calculated. At this point, she was the only one left, the tiniest advantage. Horikita's hand then stopped. She was feeling the despair that came matched with her opponent far beyond her reach. 2 minutes passed. Soon 3, there was nothing Horikita could do anymore. She couldn't deal with the pressure from Sakayanagi. Kiyotaka then chose to pick up the baton, signaling his intervention. There was a moment where Horikita nodded, entrusting everything to Kiyotaka. The real battle had started. Sakayanagi versus Kiyotaka. Every move they made took anywhere between 10 and 20 seconds. Without pause, the pieces ran upon the surface of the chessboard. Hashimoto was shocked. What otherworldly playstyle were they using? Saying their match was pathetic in comparison to the 2 genius commanders, which was understandable, the 2 amateurs seeing 2 gods going at it. It went on further to where Kiyotaka was forced to understand this as he started playing the game. He then gasped. He knew Sakanagi's skills were so profound and he couldn't help show his respect. Kiyotaka mentioned that he learned to play chess in the White Room and played against all the so-called pro instructors, but Sakayanagi is better than all of them. So what do you think, Ayanokoji-kun? Have my moves managed to reach your heart? Yeah. Painfully so. It took the full extent of Kiyotaka's ability to prevent her from closing in on him. If Kiyotaka made just one mistake, Sakayanagi would break through instantly. No need to worry. After all, Ayanokoji-kun would never make a careless mistake, Sakayanagi stated. To where he replied, saying he wouldn't mind if she gave up. Both Hashimoto and Horikita were left speechless. Eventually, during the second half of the match, Sakanagi's hand stopped. Under normal circumstances, Kiyotaka knew what she would do, but she became lost in thought instead. Because of this fast-paced battle up until this point, Hashimoto was clearly shaken by what was happening. He didn't say anything, but sensed they were in trouble. A few minutes later, Sakayanagi made a move, and it was a powerful one. Kiyotaka hadn't made a mistake, and he wasn't going to give her the opportunity to take the advantage away. But his hand was stopped this time. Ah, what a delightful match this has been. I don't care about the spectators anymore. Right now, I just want this to be the one I remember for the rest of my life. Kiyotaka didn't know how familiar both teachers were with chess, and knew they saw how extraordinary this battle was. 1 minute passed, then 2. Time was flying by. What are you doing, Ayanokoji-kun? Asked Horikita as she waited for his instructions. He only had 5 minutes left. Kiyotaka's next move would mean life or death. Sakayanagi said this was a level that wouldn't stop him, and to show her what he's got. Instead of winning, Sakayanagi really just wanted Kiyotaka to go all out. She wanted his full power. There were just 3 minutes left. Just before the 2-minute mark, he typed an instruction to Horikta. She began to move again. Contrary to how the match had been progressing earlier, Sakanagi's moves began to take longer. Her first took 30 seconds. As for the second, it took a whole minute. Kiyotaka, on the other hand, only took 1 or 2 seconds. The end game was approaching. Kiyotaka's victory was in sight. With his next move, a checkmate would be certain. Sakanagi still had moves to escape. If she messed up, she would lose. Splendid, giving praise to Kiyotaka. Time kept passing and Sakanagi was lost in thought. She'd been talking to Kiyotaka before but had fallen silent. Oi, oi, oi. Hashimoto shouted, screaming. There was no way they were going to lose like this. Sakayanagi couldn't do anything. She had less than a minute left. Truly, truly splendid, Ayanokoji-kun. You've given me more than I could have ever asked for. She praised him once again and added she's experienced firsthand what it's like to break out in a cold sweat. This is the end, she stated. The commander did not have the authority to end the game. Alternatively, Hashimoto could continue playing the game until the final checkmate, but the match was over as soon as Sakayanagi expressed her willingness to defeat. Less than 40 seconds were left. Her voice was calm when she typed into her keyboard. "Ada girl, princess," said Hashimoto. Sakayanagi came up with a new move. It was a comeback from the brink of death. Over the course of the next 2-3 moves, it felt like the match had been deviated from Kiyotaka's path. The next second, he was cornered. Only a minute to go on Kiyotaka's timer, he found himself facing the biggest hurdle yet. As the one moving the pieces, Horikta must have sensed this all. Class A's defeat, Class C's victory. For these, her dreams were just a reach away a few moments ago. And now they have slipped away. There was 1 minute left. Ayanokoji-kun. Without looking up at the camera, Horikta spoke his name. I don't want to lose. I don't want to admit defeat. I want to win. It was a cry from the bottom of her heart. Even now, I'm still thinking, racking my brain over and over, trying to come up with a move I need to make in order to win. It was an emotional plea, completely uncharacteristic of her. Horikta wanted to win this, and this was the only thing in her heart. Kiyotaka then closed his eyes. He had only a few seconds left. This is where it all ends. There were no safe routes anymore. He had this one last bet. He began typing in his keyboard, writing out one move he came up with. However, Horikta just sat there, silently, waiting for his message to arrive, almost like she was praying for it. Around 30 seconds after, his instruction got sent to Horikta. Her eyes widened and the message finally reached her headset. "So you've got some fight left in you, Ayanokoji." Hashimoto looked up at the camera with a complicated expression. He was smiling and yet not smiling at the same time. Horikta made a move and Sakanagi's timer began counting down once again. Sakanagi had mentioned she had never been in a match with a powerful opponent before. She added that his move was perfect just now and no ordinary person will ever reach his level. However, a voice echoed throughout the room. With this, my victory is all but set in stone. Soon after typing instructions, Hashimoto carried out. There were 5 moves left, and then 4, 3, before finally, Sakanagi forced the checkmate via Queen's Sacrifice. It was a play you could call the ultimate trump card, to where you can sacrifice the Queen, the strongest piece. Horikta's hand stopped. She would hold on to the faint hope his words would come flowing in again. The outcome had been decided. Ayanokoji-kun. Answer me, Ayanokoji-kun. Is there really nothing I can do anymore? He took his hands off the keyboard. Ayanokoji-kun. Horikta wanted to beat Class A more than anyone else. She entrusted everything to Kiyotaka, thinking he'd be able to handle it and win. The countdown timer for the commander intervention was stopped at 0, and the connection between us was cut off. It was my loss. Horikta lowered her head to Hashimoto. Thank you for the match. Hashimoto bowed in response. And with that, Class A won the 7th event. 4 wins, 3 losses. Class A wins the exam. That was a great match, right? Either way, Class C did a super great job, said Hoshinomiya-sensei, even joking to Kiyotaka, saying he could cry in her chest to make it feel better. She also went to mention that Kiyotaka is more amazing than she thought, pointing out he got the 10th question correct in the flash test, and he was on equal footing with Sakayanagi, and on top of that he can run really fast. It just happened to work out for me well this time, replied Kiyotaka. But she didn't buy it. She knew he was something special, and now understood why Chabishida had his eyes on him, saying it's not fair. Don't worry, I won't go around telling other students what I've seen here today. She reassured Kiyotaka, and whispered in his ear saying, Sensei doesn't dislike kids like you, Ayanokoji-kun. But if you become an enemy, Sensei might just have to end up hating you the most. With that, the smile on her face vanished and she left. I'm starting to think Hoshinomiya wears a mask like Kushida. It's so weird how she really switches up from time to time. And that's really the only thing I could think of. I just really need to see her backstory. Give it to me now, Sensei, please. Sakagami said the exam was over and they were free to leave and go home. Many thanks for today, Ayanokoji-kun. Sakayanagi said this to him. He had given her the same too. It was only 30 minutes, but Sakanagi's fatigue was showing. They went on to compliment each other a little bit more. But soon after, the acting director Shikishida walked in the room. Sakayanagi asked if he watched the special exam, where he replied saying he was in another room as he watched their battle develop. With that, he clapped his hands and praised the two of them. Sakayanagi was glad he enjoyed the show. And then went on to ask who won between Class B and D. He said Class D won 5-2, meaning they gained 190 class points. Class D would once again become Class C, and Class C would once again go back down to Class D. Alright everyone, let's leave the room. The special exam is over. Teachers, I ask that you please take your leave as well, Sakishido said. But the teacher said they had to clear up before getting cut off by Sakishido, saying that they will take care of this. Several workers then flooded at the room all at once. Then they asked if there's school personnel, to where Sakishido said that the government would like to get their hands on the equipment to get data for this exam immediately, and to rest assured. Since the acting director was the one who said it, as a teacher Sakagami sensei had no choice but to pull back and listen to his instructions. The teachers then walked away in the other direction towards the staff room. Sakayanagi on the other hand knew something was up. Something bothering you? Asked Sakishido. Kiyotaka pulled out his phone and saw a message from Harikta. Thank you for your hard work. See you later, Sakayanagi. Did you really think the move you made at the end was the very best choice you had available? She asked him. Kiyotaka said she was the only one who won. What more could there be to it? She said she imagined something silly and apologized. I'll say this now. I didn't go easy on you, replied Kiyotaka. But even so, Sakayanagi didn't seem convinced. You're such a cruel man, Ayanokoji-kun. Sakishido, who was still standing in front of the multi-purpose room, interjected in their conversation. You're a cruel man, repeating himself again. Sakayanagi asked what he meant, where he asked Kiyotaka to give her an honest answer. He tried to play dumb, but that wouldn't work. Sakishido said, properly speaking, the winner of that chess match should have been Ayanokoji-kun. Kiyotaka said he lost and asked what he meant. Which was right, Sakishido said, but questioned how Kiyotaka's input was different than one of his moves. Sakayanagi, who had been listening in silence, began to understand the current situation, and then it dawned on her. How stupid, you're saying the school forcibly intervened in our exam? It was a reply full of anger, one that went far beyond regret and disappointment. You're the one at fault, Sakayanagi-san. Not only did you refuse to follow my orders, but you even gave a protection point of all things to Ayanokoji-kun. I had no choice to be a little bit forceful to get that taken away from him. Wouldn't you agree? He exposed all of this to get back at her. He said it would be easier to force Kiyotaka out of the school, but some teachers were making it difficult. Now you see, during the match it was an instruction Kiyotaka sent to Harikta, but it took around 30 seconds to reach her headset. Up until that point it took 10 seconds for each instruction to reach her. Now the reason for this, when the input was given to the computer, it actually manipulated it to something else entirely. At the time he was going to make a different move. It was even better than the one we thought he could make. I had gone so far to prepare such a large number of personnel machines to account for his options, but he was still forced into making an extremely difficult decision, Sakishido stated. She asked why he didn't say anything, but even if Kiyotaka did, it wouldn't have mattered. Sakishido pressured Kiyotaka more and more, asking him to drop out the school so they didn't have to involve anyone else. Kiyotaka then said sorry to Sakayanagi, but she said it wasn't his fault, adding that Sakishido took up most precious memory and trampled all upon it. She then looked at Kiyotaka and asked him to play her again from before the interjection. They then went to the library, and not before long, Sakayanagi let out a sigh. She stared at the chessboard in front of her. As expected of you, Ayanokoji-kun. To my loss. It was a life of deathmatch move. Kiyotaka stated though this was a recreation, there was no guarantee that they could have won the match. She asked if this was her way of him comforting her and chuckled. She also mentioned that Hashimoto was the most talented chess player in Class A, but it lost to Harikta, who was taught by him, which means she lost in that aspect too. Ayanokoji-kun, it was a pleasure to face off against you. The answer I was looking for was clear to me now. You were certainly a genius. Your skill was by no means fake, she added. She said the winner of the first bout was Kiyotaka, and if she was to take revenge using chess again, it would take the fun out of it for her. Seeing as you brought up my history with chess, that means you did see me back then after all, Kiyotaka asked, to where Sakayanagi said after seeing his opponents in the white room, she was fonded by chess. They then started to head back and engage in idle chit-chat, saying this was the first time I left school like this. I must apologize for being such a slow walker, said Sakayanagi. Kiyotaka says okay, and she doesn't have to apologize. What are you thinking of doing from now on, she asked. Kiyotaka mentioned it would depend on what Sakishido does next. He asked the same thing to Sakayanagi, to where she replied saying she would spend time enjoying herself. And whoever comes out to play, that being Katsuragi or Ichinose, she would have fun crushing them. Kiyotaka mentions she would like to refrain from standing out as much as possible and make Harikta do her best. Thinking one day Harikta would be added to the long list of opponents Sakayanagi would name, standing with ryuen and ichinose. She said she wanted to apologize, and the reason she wanted to have a one-on-one match with him earlier was to be together with him for 1 second longer. She extended her right arm out to him. Kiyotaka thinking this was just a handshake, but when he squeezed back she put her left hand over, enveloping his. People learn the warmth when they touch each other, and that's a very precious thing. Warmth of another human is by no means a bad thing. Please remember that. Kiyotaka asked what she meant by that, to where Sakayanagi replied saying it is a belated message from her to him. Together they watched the sunset and they slowly made their way back home. There were no objectives or ulterior motives, the two of them simply exchanged tales about their daily lives, all the way until the very moment they arrived at the dorms. My voice is dead yet again. I think I recorded this in 3 sections throughout 2 days this time, and I know I'm late on the video, but my pre-planning in this is I want to make this video special, so for me taking time on it, I hope I didn't make anyone wait too long, and I don't know if this will be 2 parts yet, because I really haven't decided if I'm going to split this in 2 parts, because I haven't actually edited audio in this moment, because I'm recording an outro right now, so I don't know how long this video is going to be. If it goes more than 2 hours, I would either cut out some stuff, or I'm going to make it 2 parts. Dope volume though. Dope volume. This script was around 25k words, or almost 28k words while I'm still typing this. And goddamn, what a good volume we saw, from Class A to C to Ryuen's amazing return in Class B to D, not to mention everyone's growth, including Hirata, phenomenal moment, and Horikita. What really stole the show, I loved Horikita's development in this, and it really touched me. I think in one of the lines I recorded with Horikita, I almost started like, I think you could hear the pain in my voice, and I almost started crying a little bit. There's just too many good events, and there's so many to list off. Goddamn. Fun video to write, and for the next one, your boy's gonna take a little bit longer. I'm gonna chill a little bit and work on it bit by bit this time so there's not a huge wait. But if you really enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate a like and sub, as it really helps me know you guys want more. I'd never really set like goals, but let's set maybe 500 likes for this video. I don't know how many people are gonna watch it, but if you guys do that, then I'll get the next video out as soon as possible. Also, follow your boy's Twitter. I'm always updating all the time when I'm starting to write a video on this, and I'm always posting them good memes too. Join the Discord too for updates. You can ask me anything about Class 2 Elite or about anything else. Now I'm gonna go rest in peace. Until next time, Sensei out.